Okay, in this next part, this is part 6, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to animate the camera. I'm going to do the 3 spinning lights, and then probably in the next part I'll do the 3 cylinders. So, okay. I think what I'm going to do is the ground plane, I am going to move it a little bit lower. Something like that. Okay, and I don't know if that's fixed the Z. It might not. No, it's not bad. It's better. 3D comes in there, and you can see that since the ground plane is lower, you notice that the shadow is certainly much more dramatic. So I think I'll go back to frame 1, and I'll lower the ground plane just a little bit more. Again, you see that the Z is now fully coming in. So I fixed the Z problem. It's a really easy fix. I just lowered the ground plane on frame 1. The 3D comes in. You can see the shadow. It's a little lower than I had in my original movie, but there it is. Maybe I'll bring it back up a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's not muck about here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the camera move. So what we need to do is we need something called an empty object. So I'm going to go ahead and press Shift-C so I can get my 3D cursor back to the center of my grid. I'm going to press A to deselect so I have nothing selected. I'm going to do Shift-A, and I'm going to go down here to where it says Add, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose, come here to an empty, and you'll see there's all different kinds of empty objects. And the one that I'm going to choose is just going to be this one here called Plane Axes. Let me zoom back out. And here it is. Let me try to rotate through it so you can see. So what it is basically, it looks like a little cross, or a little plus symbol almost, a 3D plus symbol. You can see it's a axes that's showing you all 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. And what this is in Blender, and other animation programs have these as well, is that these are objects that take up one point in 3D space. So right now it's occupying 0, 0, 0 of 3D space. The camera cannot see it, it's completely invisible. So think of it as an invisible handle. And it's a handle that we can do really cool special effects to, like do puppeteering and do animation, and just give us sort of an invisible hand or an invisible grip in the Blender world to do really neat things. Alright, so we're going to use this empty to make our camera movement a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this empty. So with the empty selected, I'm going to come over here to the outliner view. I'm going to find where it says empty. I'm going to double click, and I'm going to go ahead and call this camera. I'm going to call this camera look, or actually I'll call it camera target. Okay, and you'll understand why in just a moment. So I'm going to call it camera target, and there it is there. Okay, and I'm going to leave it at the center of the world. Okay, as I go through the timeline, you'll see that the 3D comes down. Ideally, you want this camera target to really be right in the middle of the 3D. So what I'm going to do is, when the 3D stops, I'm going to go ahead and just manually move my empty object, my camera target empty, so that it's right smack dab center of the 3D. Okay, and I don't need to put any keyframes on it. I'm just telling it that's its natural place. No keyframes on this particular empty. If you did put a keyframe on it, go immediately to the dope sheet editor and select those keyframes, and of course delete them. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to tell the camera to always be looking at that empty. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and select our camera. We're then going to come over here to the far right hand side, and we're going to click on this little chain link icon. Zoom in here. You'll see the 2 chain links here. And this is called an object constraint. Of course, a constraint meaning that we're limiting an object's movement, or how it behaves. So we're going to click on Add Object Constraint, And we're going to add on this one here called track 2. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell our camera to always track and look at this empty object. So no matter where the camera is in the scene, it's always going to look at this invisible object, this empty. So right up here, you'll see a little empty space here. You'll notice it says track 2, and you'll notice that it's red. That tells you that the settings are not correct. It's not properly set up. So that's a nice little indicator. I'm going to go here to where it says target. I'm going to click here, and you'll see everything in the scene, and I'm going to choose my camera target empty. And that's why I named it camera target, just so it'd be a little more organized. Okay, so you can see what happens is immediately what happens, and this is just funky for Blender. The camera is now pointing down, when really it should be looking straight at this guy right here, which is the empty here. So I'm going to select my camera again. So now we need to tell it, we need to do our settings right here. We need to tell it what direction it should be looking to and what direction is up. And I'll be honest with you, in all the years of Blender that I've done, it's a little bit of trial and error. But I'm going to go ahead and say that the up axis is not Z. I'm going to go ahead and set it to Y. And you'll notice that when I set it to Y, first of all, the camera is now looking straight at the empty object, which is great. That's pretty much exactly what we want. Except the problem now is that you still see that it's kind of red here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to say that the 2, so I'm just trying some of the different ones here. So, okay, so if you look up here, and this is just my trial and error, if I choose X, you can see that the red has gone away, but it's still facing the wrong direction. If I choose Y, you can see that it's facing the correct direction, but it's red. If I choose Z, I get the wrong direction, but there's no red here. So now what if I do the negative one? Negative X isn't going to do it. Negative Y does it in the right direction, but I still get red. So what about if I do negative Z? And here are the settings. And again, try the trial and error, but for you and your world, these settings are probably what you're going to end up with. So negative Z for the 2 and Y for the up. Now the real test is this. I'm going to go ahead and save because I don't want anything to get messed up. The real test is if I bring the 3D down and I have the ground plane, if I just go ahead and I move my camera around, check this out. Look at that. That camera is looking and viewing and locking onto that 3D. So you see again, if I just grab it and move it around, you'll see what it's doing. It's always looking at that. Well, it's not really looking at the 3D, it's looking at the empty in there. And then of course if I move or animate the empty, it will then, the camera will track it. So this is how you do some of that really cool, slick, Hollywood effects, video game effects. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save. And let's see where we are. So the 3D comes in, the ground plane comes in. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and say that, okay, so right about here in time, this is where I want the camera to, it's going to move to the right and up. So first I want the camera to hold, because remember the camera's got to hold, 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 and it just holds right about there. Okay, so I'm going to need to put another keyframe here, and that is the holding keyframe. So with the camera selected, I'm going to press I, and I'm going to go ahead, the camera is, I'm just going to go ahead and say location. There we go. Okay, so the camera, and I'm going to go ahead and insert a keyframe on frame 1 for where it's supposed to be, just to really lock it down. So again, it's got a keyframe on frame 1. It holds, 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 and then for me, right about here where I see the 3D, I see the ground plane, and then I'm going to give it maybe, then I can play with the speed here. I'm going to go ahead and give it, there we go, something like that. I apologize if you can hear some background noise. I'm getting ready to leave for China in about 2 hours, so there's some background noise going on there. Hopefully you can hear me over it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and advance here about, maybe 80 frames to 100 frames or so. That feels right. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip to top view so you guys can see better. I'm going to go ahead and grab the camera, move it here to the right, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to maybe a front view. I'm going to go ahead and move the camera up. So you can see now the camera is looking down at the 3D. You'll go back to top view, move it around, something like that. That's kind of the angle that I want. Maybe I'll just grab it, move it over here. Okay, so that's kind of the angle that I want with the 3D. And now I'm going to go ahead and press I and insert a location keyframe. Now obviously you can see that the X is in there, so I need to fix that. But I'm just looking at the camera movement right now. So again, the camera stays put. I'm happy with that. The Y comes in, the Z comes in, the 3D comes in, the ground plane comes in, the camera does its move, and then it stops there. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now if I'm not happy with the timing, again, timing is all done up here in the dope sheet. So I'm going to come up here to the dope sheet. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the camera here. I'm going to press A so I deselect, make sure I don't do anything accidental. I'm going to zoom out my scroll wheel. And you can see the camera is it holds. If I don't like the timing here, again I just right click to select a keyframe, and then I just press G to grab it, and if I make the spacing here, right here, bigger, it will be slower. If I make it smaller, it'll be faster, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, I'm going to very quickly fix the x-axis, or the x-actor. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select the x-actor, I'm going to go back to the materials, and right now it's just a diffuse. Remember that if you want any kind of transparent effect, fade in, fade out on an object, you have to do a mix shader and include a transparent shader. So I'm going to change this from diffuse. It's going to be made into a mix shader. The first shader slot is going to be a transparent one. The second shader slot is going to be a diffuse. There you go. I don't know why I'm missing that. I'm going to change the color to the red that I wanted. There we go. And last but not least, I'm going to make the factor. If I make it go to 0, you'll see that it disappears. So I want it to be at a setting of 1. And I'm going to make sure that I'm on frame 1. So on frame 1 of my animation, I'm going to make sure that the factor here is set to 1. And I'm going to press I and insert the keyframe. And then I'm going to make it so that when it goes to its last keyframe, which is frame 87 for me, I'm going to now make the factor go back down to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and insert a keyframe, and now it will disappear. So now it has 2 keyframes. The problem is that when it gets over here, you'll see that it's nice and bright, but it's starting to fade out already. You can see it's starting to fade out. So you could either leave that in there, that's optional, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get to frame. I'm going to get to the frame that it's like right where it's off camera. So for me, that's about frame 76. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it back up to a factor of 1. And then I'll press I over that, and there we go. So now what we have is, if I play it again, you'll see that it's solid, solid, solid. Notice that the factor is holding at a value of 1. And then as it goes off camera, that's when it fades out. And how do we know if this actually worked? When we bring our camera around, you'll notice that we don't see the X. The problem is that we do see the shadow, so that's kind of an issue. Okay, I'm not sure why that's happening. If the object is gone, it shouldn't be getting shadows like that when the object is completely gone. So the simplest fix, and again, you don't have to do this right now, but wouldn't we all want a nice clean animation? So the simple fix is, very simply, is your very last keyframe. For me, that's 87. All you need to do is, on frame 87, just move the X further over so it's completely away from the ground plane. Press I to insert and update the keyframe. Okay, so there we go. Let's go ahead and see the ground plane, see the camera, and now you can see that there's no X shadow in there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it for here, and then the next video we'll go ahead and do the 3 spinning lights, and then we'll finish up on the cylinders. Okay, see you then.